When you talk about Pennsylvania, you don't talk about garment workers, you talk about coal miners, you talk about steel workers, and yet over 200,000 women were employed here during the last century as seamstresses. It began because of what was a terrible tragedy back in 1911, the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire, where something like 124 young girls tragically died trapped in the building because the owners had padlocked and chained the exits so that the girls couldn't go outside for a break. That tragedy created a public outcry to improve the industry, and the owners of the businesses didn't like that so much. It cut into their profit. So what they did was they came up with the concept of runaway businesses, runaway factories, and they would go out to rural farm areas like here in Kunkletown, and they would set up a fabric factory here. They called them Blouse Factories, and they would hire women for below wage. They would have child labor. They would have terrible conditions, not as unsafe as in the city. It wasn't like that, but women have told me stories about how hot it was in the summertime and how they would sweat. And it was long hours. But these women have never been recognized. And I noticed after a while in obituaries, I'd hear about this neighbor who worked 30 years in a blouse factory and I had no idea. Or another neighbor for 20 years was a proud member of the union that brought parity pay out here from the city. And I would read these obituaries and I would hear about how they loved their family, how they loved their church, and how they worked so hard in the garment industry. And I said, why isn't anybody telling that story? In town, we had a grist mill that was torn down recently, and everybody talks about its history as a grist mill. But nobody points out that that building, that grist mill, was converted into a blouse factory and had a second and longer life with women working in their sewing for low wages. So the more we dug into this, the more we found out that many of these women were still with us, and many of them, their families are still here, and they have lots of stories to tell. Some of the stories are heartbreaking. Some of them are joyful stories, like this one woman who told me last night about her mother. She'd get up early in the morning, do all the household chores, get her kids and husband out of the house, and go and do an 8-hour tour at the factory, come home in time to start dinner and put it on the table, and then go back to the factory for 3 or 4 hours more of work and none of it overtime. That's dedication, that's toughness, and that's the kind of thing that we want to sort of thank people for. Also, the older that we get, the more we kind of understand the need for old people to have validation for their lives. It's a little embarrassing, but you get to a certain age and you look back and you say, what was it all about? And when somebody that you don't know comes up to you and says, I'm really proud of the things you did, and I heard about this, and or I want to hear your story, that really is gratifying. And so whenever we could do that with one of these workers, it just brings a lot of joy to us. So then we decided that we'd like to have an event, and we decided to host it here in the 1855 one-room schoolhouse. And on July 22nd at 2 p.m., we'll have their families and the workers showing up. We have certificates to give, certificates of appreciation. We're going to establish a permanent exhibit here with their pictures. And then we found out that the elected officials in Pennsylvania were not aware of this up until this moment, and when they found out about it, they were thrilled. They said, gee, thank you for including us in this. So we're going to have State Senator Mario Scavello here, and also State Representative Jack Rader here, and their offices want to bring certificates. So these women and their families are going to be leaving like a big Christmas party with their arms filled with thanks for the service they gave to this community. And people don't understand, like, part of this was that in rural areas, you don't have a cash economy. Basically, you grow much of your own food, definitely your vegetables. You slaughter your own meat in many cases, and you barter. We don't think of it really as bartering. It's more a neighborly kind of thing of, I'll give you a bushel of corn and you'll give me some eggs from your chickens. money was rare. It wasn't a cash economy. So the little bit of money that these women brought home was much needed for things like paying taxes and things that you couldn't get bartered or grow yourself. So these women really are heroes. They're really tremendous figures.